After 60, stop doing these 5 things. If you don't want to end up alone, if you're over 60, you need to hear this right now, because what I'm about to tell you might sting a little, might make you uncomfortable, but it's the truth nobody else will say to your face, and chances are you're doing exactly what's pushing away the people you care about most, without even knowing it. Remember this, because by the end you'll understand why it changes everything. Loneliness isn't something that just happens to you, it's something you build one small choice at a time. I know you didn't plan to end up here feeling isolated, nobody does. You spent your whole life working, providing, solving problems, being the strong one when everyone else fell apart. And now, when you should finally be enjoying the fruits of all that labor, there are days when the silence in your house feels deafening, days when your phone sits there dead quiet, days when you scroll through your contacts and realize nobody's reached out, and you wonder, when exactly did things shift? The answer is simpler and harder to swallow than you think. And no, it's not because people today are selfish. It's not because your kids don't appreciate what you did for them. It's because, without meaning to, you might be the one creating the distance. And the cruel irony is you're probably doing it while thinking you're absolutely right, while thinking you're just being yourself, just speaking your mind. But there are things that worked when you were 40 that don't work at 60. There are behaviors people tolerated back then that now make them pull away. And if you don't stop doing these 5 things, you might wake up one morning and find yourself truly, deeply alone. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about a man named Robert, a man who had everything: 3 successful kids, a house full of memories, a career he was proud of, and who died with almost nobody at his bedside, not because his family was cruel, but because he spent decades doing something that slowly, methodically drove them all away. And when he finally understood what he'd done, his body was already failing. Keep that in the back of your mind, because his story might be closer to yours than you'd like to admit. Let's start with the first thing you need to stop doing, starting today. Stop living in the past. The present doesn't exist. Look, I get it. You've got stories. You lived through things these younger generations will never understand. You worked jobs that would break most people today. You raised kids without all the conveniences everyone takes for granted now. You earned your stripes. And yes, that matters. That absolutely matters. But here's what you're not seeing. When every single conversation becomes a history lesson, when every topic somehow circles back to how things used to be, you're not sharing wisdom. You're building a wall. Picture this. Your daughter sits down to tell you about a problem she's having at work. She's stressed. She needs to talk it through. And you listen for maybe 30 seconds before you jump in. Back when I was at the plant, and just like that, her problem vanishes. The conversation isn't about her anymore. It's about you. Again. Always. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you're helping. You're thinking you're providing context, perspective, teaching her something valuable. But here's what's actually happening in her head. He doesn't care about what I'm going through. He just wants to talk about himself. And the next time she's got a problem, she calls her friend instead, or her sister, or she just keeps it to herself, because she's learned that coming to you means listening to a lecture about 1985. You need to understand something crucial. Your memories are valuable, but they're not more valuable than what's happening in your loved ones' lives right now, today, in 2026. When you constantly redirect every conversation to the past, you're sending a message that says, what I experienced matters more than what you're experiencing. And that hurts. It hurts in a way that accumulates over time, like interest on a loan nobody wanted to take out. People don't want to compete with your nostalgia for your attention. They want you here, now, present in their actual lives, not lecturing them about how much harder you had it, or how much better things used to be, or what you would have done in their situation back in your day. And here's the thing that's hardest to accept. When you live in the past, you're already halfway gone. You're choosing to be somewhere your kids and grandkids can't follow you. You're choosing a time machine over a relationship, and eventually they stop trying to pull you back to the present. They accept that you'd rather live in memory than reality. and then they move on without you. Hold on to that thought, because what I'm about to tell you next connects to this in ways you might not expect. Now, the second thing you absolutely need to stop doing, stop criticizing everything everyone does. You've gotten good at this one, haven't you? Spotting flaws, pointing out what's wrong, offering constructive feedback that nobody asked for. You see your son's new car and immediately launch into why he should have bought a different model. Your granddaughter shows you her college essay and you're already marking it up with a red pen in your mind. Your daughter-in-law cooks Sunday dinner and you mention, casually of course, that it could use more seasoning. And you don't think you're being mean, you think you're being helpful. You've got decades of experience after all. You've learned things the hard way. You're just trying to save them from making the same mistakes you made. That's what you tell yourself anyway. But here's the truth. Constant criticism isn't help, it's poison. Because here's what happens when you criticize someone every time you see them. They start avoiding you, not dramatically, not with a big confrontation. They just gradually create distance. They stop sharing their wins with you because they know you'll find something wrong with them. They stop asking your opinion because they know it'll come wrapped in judgment. They stop bringing their partners around because they're tired of you picking apart their choices. Think about your grandson. He comes over excited about making the varsity team. And instead of celebrating with him, you say, "Well, that's good, but you know the real challenge is keeping your spot." Or your daughter tells you she got a promotion and you immediately ask if it comes with more stress, more hours, if she's sure she can handle it. Every single one of those moments is a tiny rejection, a small signal that says, your joy isn't quite good enough for me. And those moments add up. They compound, till one day that grandson doesn't tell you anything anymore. That daughter shares her good news with her friends first, and you find out third hand, if at all. And then you sit there wondering why nobody tells you anything, why you feel left out, why you're always the last to know what's happening in your own family's life. But you built that situation. You taught them that sharing with you means getting critiqued, not celebrated. Here's something you need to hear. At this stage of your life, you're not raising anyone anymore. You're not their boss. You're not their teacher. Your job isn't to correct and improve everyone around you. Your job, if you want to keep people in your life, is to be a soft place to land, a source of encouragement, someone who makes people feel better about themselves, not worse. Because here's the brutal reality. People avoid negativity. They avoid people who make them feel small, who make them feel like they're never quite measuring up. And if that's what you've become, the person who always has something critical to say, then you shouldn't be surprised when people stop coming around. You want to know why that chair at Thanksgiving is empty? Look at how you treated the person who used to sit there. You want to know why your phone doesn't ring? Think about what it's like to be on the other end of a call with you lately. Remember that. Because the third thing I need to tell you is even harder to admit to yourself. The third thing that's pushing everyone away. Stop keeping score of everything you've done. You gave, you sacrificed, you worked 2 jobs to put them through college. You paid for the wedding, you helped with the down payment, you babysat when they needed you. You were there, and you're absolutely right. You did all of that. That's real. That's not nothing. But here's where you're going wrong. You're treating love like a ledger, like a balance sheet where every deposit entitles you to unlimited withdrawals, and you're cashing checks constantly, demanding attention, demanding visits, demanding gratitude, demanding that your adult children organize their lives around your expectations because, after everything I did for you, that's not how this works. Love isn't transactional. The sacrifices you made as a parent weren't investments that your kids now owe interest on for the rest of their lives. You chose to have children. You chose to provide for them. And yes, it was hard. Yes, you gave up things. But that doesn't mean they're now permanently indebted to you. Think about how it feels when someone keeps reminding you of every favor they ever did for you. How it makes you feel small, guilty, trapped. That's what you're doing to your own children every time you bring up how much you sacrificed, how much you gave, how little you're getting back now. Your daughter calls to say she can't make it for Sunday dinner because her daughter has a soccer tournament. And instead of saying, no problem, have fun, you say, well, I guess I'll just sit here alone then. I did raise you for 18 years, but I understand you're busy. You think you're being subtle. You're not. You're wielding guilt like a weapon. And here's what happens. People start to resent you, not because they don't appreciate what you did, but because you won't let them just love you. You insist on making every interaction a reminder of debt owed. And resentment is relationship poison. It seeps into everything. It turns genuine affection into obligatory duty. And once that switch flips, it's almost impossible to flip it back. You want your kids to want to spend time with you, then stop making them feel guilty when they can't. Stop keeping a mental tally of who visited last and who owes you a phone call. Stop comparing what you did for your parents with what your kids do for you, because times have changed, family structures have changed, and that comparison isn't fair to anyone. If you want people around you, you need to be worth being around. You need to give them something more than guilt and obligation. You need to give them lightness, peace. The feeling that being in your presence makes their life better, not harder. Because here's the thing, you can be right about everything you sacrificed and still end up alone. You can win every argument about who did more and who owes whom, and still die in a nursing home with nobody visiting. Is that the prize you want? To be right but lonely? Keep that question in your mind, because the fourth thing is even more insidious, and you might not even realize you're doing it. The fourth thing, destroying your relationships. Stop turning everything into a tragedy. Your back hurts. Your doctor changed your medication. Your friend from church is having surgery. The weather's too hot. The traffic was terrible. Your favorite restaurant changed its menu. Your energy isn't what it used to be. You're tired. You're in pain. Everything is difficult. And I'm not saying your struggles aren't real. They are. Aging is hard. Bodies break down. Loss is real. Pain is real. But there's a difference between sharing genuine difficulty and drowning everyone around you in a constant stream of complaints. And somewhere along the way, you cross that line. Every conversation has become a recitation of what's wrong. Every phone call is a chance to list your ailments. Every visit turns into an organ recital where you go through each body part and its problems, and you've stopped noticing that when you talk, people's eyes glaze over, that they find excuses to cut conversations short, that they stop asking, "How are you?" because they know they'll get a 30-minute answer they didn't want. Here's what's happening. You're using your suffering as currency. You've learned that when you emphasize how bad you have it, people pay attention. They feel sorry for you. They come around. So you keep doing it. You amplify every ache and pain because it guarantees you won't be forgotten. But here's the problem. Pity isn't the same as love. And people will only give you pity for so long before they start avoiding you altogether. Because being around someone who's perpetually miserable is exhausting. It's draining. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has no bottom. Nothing anyone does makes a difference. Nothing anyone says changes how you feel. So eventually, they stop trying. Your grandson comes to visit and tells you about his new job, and within 5 minutes, you've steered the conversation to your knee replacement. Your daughter takes you out for lunch and you spend the whole meal complaining about the service, the noise, how you can't eat half the things on the menu anymore. Your son calls to check in and you immediately launch into everything that went wrong this week. And you know what they think afterward? That was exhausting. I need a week to recover before I do that again. And so the calls get further apart, the visits get shorter, not because they don't care, but because you've made caring for you feel like a burden they can't bear. You need to understand something. People want to be around people who are still living, not just surviving. They want to share moments of joy, not just witness your decline. And if all you offer is misery and complaint, you're not inviting connection. You're demanding emotional labor. This doesn't mean you have to pretend everything's fine. It doesn't mean you can't have bad days or share genuine struggles. But it means you need to be more than your problems. You need to still have interests, still find things beautiful, still laugh, still engage with the world beyond your own suffering. Because here's the hard truth, when people think of spending time with you fills them with dread instead of joy, they're going to choose not to spend time with you, and you can't guilt them into wanting to be there. You can't shame them into enjoying your company. Either you give people a reason to want to be around you, or you end up alone. It's that simple. And now the fifth and final thing. This one might be the hardest to hear because it goes against everything you think you know about family. The fifth thing you must stop doing immediately. Stop trying to run everyone's life. You raised your kids, you guided them through childhood, through adolescence, into adulthood, and you did your job. They're grown now, they're making their own choices, living their own lives, raising their own children, and you can't let go. You still want to control how they spend their money. You want veto power over their parenting decisions. You disapprove of their careers, their spouses, their homes, their haircuts, their politics. And you make sure they know it, because in your mind you're just trying to help. You're just trying to steer them away from mistakes. But here's what you're actually doing. You're suffocating them. Your daughter decides to go back to work and you tell her she's neglecting her children. Your son decides to move for a better job opportunity, and you guilt him about leaving you behind. Your grandson decides to take a gap year, and you lecture him about wasting his life. Every choice they make that doesn't align with what you would do becomes an opportunity for you to intervene, criticize, manipulate. And when they don't do what you want, you punish them. The silent treatment, the guilt trips, the not-so-subtle digs. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. I certainly wouldn't make that choice, but it's your life. You weaponize your disappointment. You make them pay for their independence. Here's what you don't understand. Your adult children don't owe you obedience. They don't owe you a life that looks like the one you would choose. They have a right, a fundamental human right, to make their own decisions, even if those decisions are different from what you'd want. Even if those decisions turn out to be mistakes. And when you try to control them, when you make your love conditional on their compliance, you're not being a parent, you're being a tyrant, and people rebel against tyrants, or they flee from them. Think about what you're really doing. You're telling your children that you don't trust them, that you don't respect them, that you don't believe they're capable of running their own lives. And you wonder why they don't share things with you. Why they make major decisions without consulting you. Because they've learned that your consultation isn't advice, it's a demand for control. Your son is 45 years old and you're still trying to tell him how to manage his finances. Your daughter is 50 and you're criticizing how she's raising her teenagers. Do you not see how insulting that is? How diminishing? And here's the saddest part. While you're so busy trying to control who they are, you're missing out on actually knowing who they are. You're so focused on the version of them you want them to be that you can't see the actual human being standing in front of you. You're so invested in making them conform that you're losing the chance to have a real relationship with them. Let me tell you something. The only control you have is over yourself. That's it. And the harder you try to control others, the faster you'll lose them. Because adults don't stick around for people who treat them like children. They don't maintain close relationships with people who don't respect their autonomy. You want your family in your life, then accept them as they are. Not as you wish they were, not as they used to be. As they are right now, today, with all their choices you don't understand and all their values that might differ from yours. Respect is more important than agreement. You can think your son made a terrible choice and still support him. You can believe your daughter's doing it all wrong and still love her without condition. You can disapprove and still show up. That's what mature love looks like. But if you keep demanding that everyone bend to your will, that everyone live according to your blueprint, you're going to end up exactly where you're afraid of ending up, alone, wondering what happened to your family. Now let me tell you about Robert. Because his story is the story I wish he could have changed. I met Robert at a pharmacy about 7 years ago. We were both waiting for prescriptions and we started talking. He was 73 at the time, retired engineer. Worked for Boeing for 36 years, 3 kids, all college educated, all successful, 5 grandchildren. By every measurable standard, he'd built a good life. But Robert was lonely, desperately lonely, and he knew it. His oldest son lived 20 minutes away, but visited maybe twice a year. His daughter was across the country, and they talked once a month, maybe. Strained conversations that lasted 5 minutes. His youngest had essentially cut contact. Birthday cards, that was about it. The grandkids he barely knew, and Robert could not understand why. He spent that first conversation telling me everything he'd done for those kids. The sacrifices, the money, the time. How he'd worked himself to the bone to give them opportunities he never had. And he was right, he had done all of that. He'd been a good provider, a responsible father. But as he talked, I started hearing something else underneath. Every story came with an edge, a criticism, a disappointment. He talked about how his oldest son wasted his degree by going into education instead of engineering, how his daughter threw away her potential by taking time off to raise kids, how his youngest was too sensitive and couldn't take honest feedback. He told me about holidays where he'd point out what his daughter-in-law did wrong with the turkey, family gatherings where he'd corner his son about his retirement planning, phone calls with his daughter where he'd spend the whole time questioning her parenting choices, birthday parties where he'd criticize the present his grandson gave him because it wasn't practical, and he genuinely didn't understand that he was the problem. He thought he was just being helpful. He thought he was just being honest. He thought he was just exercising his right as the patriarch to have opinions. He couldn't see that every interaction had become a weapon. Every conversation had become a test his children would inevitably fail. I ran into Robert a few more times over the next couple of years. Same pharmacy. And every time the story was the same. He was alone, his children were distant, and he was convinced it was their fault. They were too busy, too self-absorbed, too ungrateful. I heard he died about 3 years ago. I didn't know him well enough to go to the funeral, but I asked someone who did. They said maybe 20 people showed up. His kids were there, of course, but they didn't cry. There was no grief-stricken family surrounding the casket, sharing memories and holding each other up. There was duty, obligation, and relief. That's what haunts me, the relief. Because when your family feels relieved that you're gone, you lost them long before you died. The relationship was dead for years. Your death was just making it official. Robert never changed. He spent his last years convinced he was right and everyone else was wrong, and he died alone because of it. Not physically alone, he was in a hospital with nurses around, but truly deeply alone in the way that matters, disconnected, unvisited, unmissed. And I'm telling you his story because you still have time, you can still choose differently, but you have to be honest with yourself, brutally honest. You have to stop defending yourself, stop justifying yourself, stop telling yourself that everyone else is the problem. Because here's the truth. Loneliness in old age is rarely an accident. It's rarely bad luck. It's usually the accumulation of years of pushing people away while telling yourself you're doing nothing wrong. The 5 things I told you about, those are the tools you use to build your isolation, and you might be using all of them. You might be living in the past while criticizing the present, keeping score while playing the victim and trying to control everyone because you can't control your own fear of irrelevance. And you can keep doing that. You can keep insisting you're right. You can keep blaming everyone else for not measuring up. You can spend your remaining years being righteously indignant about how unappreciated you are. Or you can change. You can choose to be present instead of living in memory. Every time you catch yourself starting a sentence with "back when," you can stop. You can ask instead, "Tell me more about what you're going through." You can listen without comparing, without lecturing, without redirecting attention to yourself. You can choose to encourage instead of criticize. When your granddaughter shows you her artwork, you can say, "That's wonderful," and mean it. You don't have to point out what could be improved. You don't have to demonstrate your expertise. You can just celebrate, just appreciate, just love without condition. You can choose to give without keeping score. You can help because you want to help, not because you're building credit you'll cash in later. You can visit because you enjoy their company, not because you're entitled to equal visits in return. You can love generously instead of transactionally. You can choose to share your life without making it a tragedy. Yes, things are hard. Yes, aging is difficult. But you can also talk about the book you're reading, the show you're enjoying, the memory that made you smile. You can give people a reason to enjoy talking to you instead of dreading it. And you can choose to respect instead of control. You can watch your adult children make choices you wouldn't make and keep your mouth shut. You can disagree with their parenting and still support them. You can let them live their lives and trust that they'll figure it out, just like you did. These aren't small things I'm asking of you. These are fundamental changes in how you interact with the people you love. But they're possible, and they're necessary if you don't want to end up like Robert. Because here's what I need you to understand. Time is running out. You don't have another decade to figure this out. You don't have another 5 years to gradually come around. Every day you spend being difficult is a day your family is deciding whether it's worth it to maintain contact with you. And at some point, the answer becomes no. And you might think, fine, if they don't appreciate me, I don't need them. But you do. You do need them. And more importantly, you want them. You want to see your grandchildren grow up. You want to be included in family gatherings. You want someone to call when you're scared or sick or just lonely on a Tuesday afternoon. But you're not going to get that by being right. You're not going to get that by being difficult. You're going to get that by being someone people actually want to be around. So the question is, are you willing to change? Are you willing to look in the mirror and admit that maybe you're the reason your phone doesn't ring as much as it used to? That maybe you're the reason the chair next to you is empty? Because if you can admit that, if you can take responsibility for your part in your own loneliness, then you can fix it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but you can start. Today, right now. You can call your kid and just ask how they are without following up with criticism. You can accept an invitation without complaining about the time or the location. You can bite your tongue when you disagree instead of starting an argument. You can say thank you without adding, but you should have. You can show up without expecting applause for showing up. Small changes, consistent changes, changes that say, I want to be in your life more than I want to be right. I want connection more than I want control. Because at the end of everything, that's what matters. Not who was right, not who did more, not who deserved better. What matters is who showed up. Who held hands, who loved imperfectly but genuinely. Robert died with a lot of money in the bank. He died knowing he'd been a good provider. He died convinced he'd done everything right. But he died alone. And all that righteousness, all that certainty, didn't keep him company in those final days. You can have a different ending, but only if you choose it. Only if you act now, while there's still time. While there are still people who might pick up the phone if you call, while there are still relationships that can be repaired. The loneliness you're afraid of isn't inevitable. It's a choice, your choice, and you're making it every single day with how you treat the people in your life. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep doing the 5 things that push everyone away, or are you going to have the courage to change? Because I promise you this. On your deathbed, you won't care about being right. You won't care about winning arguments or maintaining control or proving points. You'll care about who's there, who stayed, who loved you enough to keep trying even when you made it hard. And if you want that, if you want people at your bedside holding your hand, telling you it's okay, then you need to be the kind of person who deserves that. Not because of what you did decades ago, but because of who you are right now, today, in this moment. The choice is yours, it always has been, but the window is closing. And once it closes completely, once those relationships are truly dead, no amount of regret will bring them back. So choose connection over control. Choose presence over past. Choose love over being right. Choose before it's too late. Because loneliness doesn't just happen, you build it. One criticism at a time, one guilt trip at a time, one attempt at control at a time. And if you keep building it, you'll wake up one day and realize you built a prison, and you're the only one in it. That's not the ending you want. So don't create it. Change now, while you still can.